are live.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, all. Welcome to the Village of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for Friday, August 9th, 2024. Again, we'd like to thank LTV Studios for helping us out in the past few months. And welcome back to the Emergency Services Building. The minutes for July 12th, 2024. So I have a motion. So moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have an extension of time request for Mark K. Webb, 123 Egypt Lane. Billy, can you just give us a quick?
The applicant's representative has requested an additional year to complete the project. They are still in the process of engaging. The request indicates that they're still in the process of engaging a contractor for the work. So they've asked for another year. I wouldn't have an objection to the board approving another year.
Okay, Tim, do we make a motion on this? Or?
Yes.
Okay, so can I have a motion for an extension of time for 123 Egypt Lane for one more year? So moved. Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have two determinations today, and the entire files are at Village Hall. In the application of Ethel Chase and Daphne Rowe, 15 Jones Road, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-12-7-3, for an area variance and a wetlands permit to construct a swimming pool, dry well, fencing, and pool equipment is granted with conditions. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Gabby, can you poll the board, please?
Mr. McGurk?
Yes.
Mr. McMullen?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzsimons? And then, Ms. Fitzsimons, if you could just say that you reviewed the...
Yes, I was not at the June meeting, but I have reviewed the minutes, the application, and the June meeting. I was present at the July meeting, so I'm able to render a decision.
Thank you.
Pardon me, should also be noted that one person just didn't show up to LTV, but they're being sent over here right now. We don't know what the hearing is.
Thank you. Well, the hearings are coming up. In the application of Nancy Kane, Testimony Trust, 29 Dayton Lane, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-8-3-15 for an area variance for excessive coverage to construct a patio and a pool equipment is granted. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Gabby, poll the board, please.
Mr. McGurk?
Yes.
Mr. McMullen?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzsimons?
Yes, and again, I was not at the June meeting, but I've read the minutes, the application, and was present for the July meeting and can render a decision.
Thank you. The adjournments for today: Hunting Hospitality LLC, White House Partners LP, Abraham M. Dweck and Robert Levine, Guildhall of East Hampton, Beach House Realty LLC, and Richard A. Shilowitz Living Trust. And we have the new hearings of the day. Can you just tell me who's sitting on these hearings?
So for 15 Drew Lane, we have Mr. McGurk, Mr. McMullen, Mr. Barris, Ms. Fitzsimons, and Mr. Carmelli. And then I'll read the public hearing notice.
Thank you.
Application of Sophia Hudson, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-13-13-4, in accordance with Section 278-7B1 of the Zoning Code, requests to appeal the building inspector's interpretation that the renovation and reconstruction of a residence that is legally pre-existing and non-conforming in gross floor area and coverage requires variances from the provisions contained in Section 278-3A9A and Section 278-3A13A, and in the alternative is requesting a 707 square foot variance from Section 278-3A13A to make alterations resulting in a residence containing 4,701 square feet of gross floor area, where the maximum permitted gross floor area is 3,994 square feet, and the legally pre-existing gross floor area is 4,852 square feet. The subject property is 29,449 square feet in area and is located at 15 Drew Lane and is in Residence District R160. The project is classified as a Type 2 action in accordance with SECRA.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman.
Yeah, Mr. McGurk, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, the board, is have Linda Margolin give a short presentation on our interpretation argument, and then if necessary, I'll proceed with the variance application. Is that all right?
Thank you.
Okay.
I think I took yours.
Good morning, Chairman McGurk and members of the board. My name is Linda Margolin. I'm one of the lawyers for the applicant. At this point, I'm going to be discussing a couple of sets of minutes of these village board that bear on interpreting this ordinance, and I'd like to hand them up. I've got enough copies for everyone on the board, plus your attorney. So the ordinance in question was adopted in 2021, and it says, it was the subject of an introductory resolution in July of 2021, and what was proposed at that time was a statute that said, a non-conforming building or structure which lawfully exists that is devoted to a conforming use, which is what we have here, may be enlarged, reconstructed, structurally altered, restored, or repaired in whole or in part, except that the degree of nonconformity, which is in quotes, shall not be increased. For the purposes of this subsection, an increase in the quote-unquote degree of nonconformity shall include any increase in the nonconformity of a nonconforming building or structure with the dimensional regulations of this chapter, and shall include any increase in the nonconformity related to length, width, or height of the nonconforming portion of the building or structure. This particular residence has a single nonconformity, which is its gross floor area exceeds the gross floor area that's currently allowed under the code. The proposed changes to the building, which represented essentially lopping off certain parts and adding certain parts, resulted in a GFA that was less than the pre-existing non-conforming GFA. And therefore, we believed that it was entitled to a building permit without the need for a variance because the non-conformity at issue, an excessive GFA, was not being made greater. We submitted a memorandum of law that was based on a code interpretation letter that we got from the building department, which was subsequently withdrawn. But since that time, we submitted plans, and the building permit was denied upon the grounds that we needed a variance for the GFA. So we are still here for an interpretation. What I wanted to point out to the board, aside from the plain language, which allows alteration, reconstruction, enlargement, so on and so forth, is that when this came on for consideration as an introductory resolution before the village board, and that's the excerpt of the July 30th, 2021 minutes that I've provided to you, there were two comments that were made before it was set for a public hearing. It said that, and I'm going to read from the minutes, Billy Hayjack provided a brief introduction of the proposed legislation. The present code is somewhat vague on non-conforming buildings containing conforming uses. For example, currently a single-family residence required setback is 20 feet. The building sits 10 feet from the side yard. Repairs such as replacing rotten sills or moving a window are currently perceived as alterations because it's structural work and would require a variance. In the past, the building department has used their judgment in deciding which projects need a variance or not. Repairs and alterations that don't increase the degree of nonconformity, if the house doesn't get any closer to the property line or bigger, should be permitted without review by the ZBA. The proposed legislation defines it much clearer. That was Mr. Hayjack's comment. And then it says that board members and building inspector Tom Priato were in agreement and felt it would be much easier for homeowners, the ZBA, and the building department. I will say that as people who work regularly as counsel for property owners who want to know what they can do with their property, of course, clarity in the code helps, because when clients ask us for advice on what they can do without a variance, we're able to look at this code section and say to them, or at least we thought we could, if you want to do something to the house, change the way it's shaped, but you're not exceeding your pre-existing non-conforming GFA, you should be able to pull a building permit for that without going to the ZBA. The other comment that I wanted to point out to you occurred at the public hearing that was held on August 20th, 2021, and that's the second excerpt that I've given to you. Simply, there were there were a great many comments because there was a whole suite of changes in the zoning law that were enacted at that time and on for a public hearing. But the very first one, which was called Introductory 16 and became Local Law 19 of 2021, really had only one substantive comment from all of the people who commented. And that comment was from your board member, Joe Rose. And what Mr. Rose had to say, and I share this with you because he was speaking from the perspective of a ZBA member, was, he said, this amendment regarding alterations and repairs to non-conforming buildings containing conforming uses makes good sense as long as it does not apply to use changes. And then he goes on to express that his concern is that a non-conforming structure devoted to a conforming use, he wanted to make sure that this portion of the law wouldn't allow a change in the use to a non-conforming use or a different use. And that's not what we're asking for. We are asking for an interpretation that we think is quite straightforward and matters not only to this case, but generally to people who own property in the village, which is, can we in fact alter, enlarge, reconstruct, so on and so forth, a non-conforming structure devoted to a conforming use as long as we don't increase the degree of nonconformity? And I'd urge you to say the answer is yes. Thank you.
Board members, any questions for Ms. Martin? Not at the moment, no. Okay. Mr. Akron, you want?
Well, ask,
And this is, I'll ask a question.
Sure.
Is this a rebuild or is this just tear down and?
it's a renovation. It's a,
renovation? Okay.
Linda, come here.
Oh, sorry.
I just, I want to point out on your demo plan here on D100, number 1, it says demolish entire structure from footing to top of the roof, including all footings, foundation, walls, slabs, exterior and interior walls, windows, doors, remove existing equipment, including electric, mechanical, and plumbing. That's why I'm.
It's just a portion of the,
We
of
have
that.
the
Well, it says, the whole thing says 1 basement demolition plan.
We have the architect here to, explain any of the, Damien is here. Would you like him, John, to explain?
I'd like to hear from Tom for next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Sure,
to give
of
his,
course.
because he gave the, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So I just wanted to speak in a general sense before we got to the actual project and give a sense of how my office and myself looked at the nonconformity of something such as GFA. And in consideration of section 278(1)(a) and those changes made within, just as a basic premise, I'll say I, but I'm speaking for my office. I feel that GFA, especially when it's non-conforming, it is something that needs to be maintained and can be abandoned if not properly considered or moved around. So even as GFA is moved around, let me put it this way, that the GFA that's non-conforming, I feel, is non-conforming in that volume, in that particular area where it exists. Because as GFA is moved to different areas on the property, regardless of if it can meet the setback or not, it can have differing effects. You're moving around GFA that you don't have as of, well, I won't say that you don't have it as of right, but it's not code compliant. It's a non-conforming situation. So you're moving something that's a bonus that you have. I agree that the code goes on to say that non-conforming structures, can be altered as long as the non-conformity is not increased, but it also goes on to talk about length, width, and height, and dimensionally. So I'm of the mind that if you're taking GFA that is a bonus to you because you have a a non-conforming issue and you put it in a space where it never existed, I'm considering that a non-conformity. And we look to the board for some kind of clarity and an attempt to move forward in the proper direction and guidance. So that's,
So what you're saying is basically the volume of the house and how it's perceived from the street and stuff is changing in this instance.
it is, I mean, the code doesn't really, isn't specific there. I mean, so yeah, I don't want to read into something that's not in the code. And it's not, we know the intent of GFA and massing, et cetera, but somebody already has that here and they're, grandfathered in for that volume. But once you take that volume and put it somewhere else, it can have a differing effect on different properties. And that's the consistently how we've been. And I just wanted to explain that.
I have a question because
Yes.
typically when you have non-conforming grandfathered bonuses in place, there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is you have it because it was grandfathered, and once you do away with it for whatever reason, you don't get it back. Here under the code, you do get it back. You do get to be additive as long as you are not increasing that non-conformity. So you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, until you're putting it in a spot where it never was.
And then when you look at what they are suggesting here, and the demo does seem to be extensive, by the way, but what they're suggesting here, if it wasn't the issue of playing around with conformity, and this was a new plan coming in front of you, do you see other issues with this plan? If you put aside the point of, you're kind of playing around with your bonus that you had before.
Well,
This is a brand new application here in terms of setbacks, in terms of heights, in terms of, the various other code issues. Do you see an issue with this?
Well, I see it a stretch to call it a renovation alteration, quite honestly.
So that's the main issue, though, because when I look at the demo plan, that's what I see. It's just pretty excessive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak to what the board has before them. I just want to stay with.
Yeah, let's hear what the architects have to say too for a
okay.
minute.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies for being late.
Wait, they're gonna,
Okay.
Apparently takes more than 4
I'm
hours
just going
these
to
days.
swear you in.
Tell us traffic, right?
Genuinely.
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Manuel Damian Zamora, 319 West 18th Street.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. So should I answer the question about the demolition?
Maybe just go over the plan a little bit. real
Sure.
quick.
Can I start, maybe I'll start with just the intent, what we set out to do, because I think it might put in perspective why the house is configured like this. It was a unique case condition in the sense that we had an owner who wasn't actually necessarily interested in preserving her rights to a large home. She had a very clear vision of what she wanted to do, which was to bring it back to some degree of its history. So they hired us because of that, and we tried to do something that made sense. One of the things that we also discovered in the disposition of the house, what was original and what was added, that was part of the program. And what was added was in a location that shaded much of the lots. Created a lot of shadow in what is going to be a hobby of hers, gardening. So we decided by swinging that mass, which is basically the living room, which is currently a 2-story mass, more in line with the existing house, that we would achieve that. So in doing so, we are trying to preserve as much of the main mass of the house, but also the demolition notes that you're referencing, number 1, really affect the areas where we're actually peeling away. So just going from the upper right-hand corner, clockwise, the screen porch, that's the area of the house that we are peeling off. The living room, we're peeling off. And the living hall enclosed porch vestibule, it's very hard to see without the second floor overlaid on top of it, but much of that is actually well, I shouldn't say much of it, probably about 50% of that is under the existing portion of the second floor, the vestibule and part of the enclosed porch. But in order to support that, in coordination with the engineers, those foundations, those walls would need to be removed. And then swinging finally to the upper left-hand corner, that other note, the number 1 there, what was a portico share in 1915, we're going to peel that off there. Partially because it's not in use currently. It's an outdoor deck right now, and she has no use for it. And it also just doesn't feel, it lengthens the house unnecessarily.
Any members have any questions? Okay. Want to keep going, or you?
I could, but I don't want to waste your, I'd happy to answer any questions, but it's,
What's everybody's feeling on this, please? Yes, please, Ms. Margot.
If I understand Mr. Priato's presentation, his suggestion is that the language at the end of this section creates some ambiguity over what it means by saying length, width, or height. And I would tell you that length, width, and height have to refer essentially to yard setbacks and height limitations in the village code. They clearly don't refer to GFA, which is something different. Gross floor area is measured to the exterior of the frame of a building. It is not, I would say it has a relationship to the building's volume, but it's not a volumetric measure. The code doesn't have a volumetric measure. And I don't want to poo-poo the building department's concern, but the code does not purport to regulate volume. It regulates yard setbacks, it regulates height, it regulates GFA. And so given the rules for construing ambiguities in zoning code enactments, even if you thought this was ambiguous, we would argue that you're obliged to find the interpretation that is favorable to the homeowner and unfavorable to the municipality, because it's a municipality's obligation to enact zoning codes with clarity. Thank you.
Board members? I don't have any issue with it but as long as it remains a remodel, not a total tear down and replaced. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I totally understand where the applicant is coming from as well. There is not a portion of the code, as Tom said, also, when it comes to volume or massing, as long as these changes do fall within the code and do not require variances for setback or height or something like that, then I don't have a problem with this.
Any other board members?
I agree. If it's conforming, and that's why I asked that question specifically. If it's conforming and it came as a new project and it's conforming, then I support it. I have no issues with it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just to clarify, and Mr. Ackerman, you can confirm that this is an application in two parts. In the first instance, you're asking for an interpretation.
Yes, that's correct.
If the interpretation is one way, it moots the request for a variance.
That's correct.
If it's another way, you have in the alternative an application for variance relief.
Right. I think we're giving a variance.
Okay, so I think,
So we do.
I don't know if the board is prepared to vote today, but the sequencing would be a decision on the interpretation, and subject to that decision, a decision on the variance.
Well, if I have a majority on the interpretation, why is it necessary to pursue and waste your time on a variance application?
I don't think we want to.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We give interpretation on the. It will affect other properties down the road, right? If we give, I'd rather give the variance for this. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'd rather give the variance for this particular property than interpretation of the code. I don't. I mean.
I
board
think just
members,
to-
Can we? Or I don't,
Well, just to complete the record.
No, I mean, I can go through the.
Make your argument in the alternative.
I'm prepared, but if there is a majority that agrees with the interpretation, I think this is a really important interpretation of this provision. I gainsay that probably 1/3 of all variance applications in this village, okay, are in violation of this statute. Most homes in East Hampton, you go down McGurk Street, you go down Drew Lane, you go down Egypt Lane, you go down Georgica Road. My own home that was built in 1978, every home in East Hampton, I bet most of your homes are pre-existing non-conforming. And we advise clients based upon the statute. And in our view, and I believe a majority of your view, though I shouldn't speak for you, sorry, it's unnecessary to go and spend the time and the money to bring applications for variances. This work has been pending in this application for interpretation since March of last year. It seems to me that a good interpretation, a well-written interpretation and direction to the building department to issue building permits in such cases where you have pre-existing non-conforming would be appropriate. It would save the homeowner's time and money. It would save this board's time and energy. It would save the building department's time in denial. It would save Billy Hajak's time in reviewing applications. I've gone through the last 6 months a list of applications before this board, and more than 1/3 of them, probably half of them, are pre-existing non-conforming homes that don't exceed what's permitted. So I'd ask you to take a serious, hard look at this question and give a proper interpretation that could guide us as attorneys, as architects, as builders in advising our clients. So Tim, if you want me to, John, I'll quickly go through the variance, okay? So we have a pre-existing home of 4852 that's pre-existing non-conforming. There's no question about it. We're proposing a home of 4701. That's correct, right, Peter? 4701. The present code permits a GFA of 3994. So that's a 707 variance that exceeds what's already pre-existing non-conforming. The grounds that establish a variance are the following. No impact on character of the neighborhood. In fact, we're reducing the GFA by 151 square feet. This is a traditional home, as the architect and the plans indicate. Are there any alternatives to a variance? No, because the house is already pre-existing non-conforming, and based upon an interpretation, a variance should not be required, but it is presumably here. Is the variance substantial? No, since there's less GFA. Is there any environmental impact? No, there is no environmental impact, obviously. Is it self-created? Well, actually, when the client bought this property, she was advised by her architects and counsel that it was not necessary to have a variance. Theoretically, it is not self-created. There is a letter from an adjoining neighbor who has supported this application. So on that basis, we would certainly be entitled to a variance.
thank you. So do we have two things pending here. Do we just close the hearings or
Yeah, you can close the hearing and,
we vote
Yeah.
on the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, I'd ask that the hearing
Anybody
be
have
closed.
any other questions? Nope. All right, so a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, thank you.
all in favor? I didn't know if there was.
Anyone in the
No, is anybody, sorry about that. We got to reopen this hearing real quick. Does anybody in the audience have anything to say on the hearing? Okay, motion to close the hearing again.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Gabby?
Okay, so for 27 Hunting Lane, we have Mr. McGurk, Mr. McMullen, Mr. Barris, Ms. Fitzsimons, and Mr. Carmelli. And I'll read the public hearing notice.
Thank you.
Application of Stanley DeJong Osborne and Virginia Osborne, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-3-8-4 for area variances from Chapter 278 zoning to make alterations to an existing residence that exceeds allowable gross floor area and to construct a detached garage. A 1,059 square foot variance is requested from Section 278-3A13A to make alterations to a pre-existing non-conforming residence containing 4,496 square feet of gross floor area where the maximum permitted gross floor area is 3,436 square feet. A 7.5-foot variance is requested from Section 278-3A5B to construct a detached garage 7.5 feet from a side yard lot line where the required side yard setback is 15 feet. The subject property is 24,369 square feet in area and is located at 27 Hunting Lane in Residence District R40 in the Hunting Lane Historic District. This project is classified as a Type 2 action in accordance with SECRA and requires review by the Village Design Review Board.
Good morning. Can you swear Britton in, please? Thank you.
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Britton Bistrian, 21 Nappy Harbor Road, Amagansett, New York.
Thank you. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Britton.
Good morning. I'm Britton Bistrian here today representing Virginia and Stanley Osborne, the owners that reside at 27 Hunting Lane in the Village. I'm joined by Alan Robinson, who is the architect for the project and can address any design questions should the board have any. The subject property is a half acre. It's a parcel of land on the south side of Hunting Lane, approximately 500 feet east of Main Street. It's improved with a 2-story residence, swimming pool, and a detached garage. All the improvements are covered under the certificate of occupancy. The proposal in front of you today can be boiled down to 2 variance requests. One, ironically, is what Mr. Ackerman was just up here discussing, but I'm still going to proceed with the variance, regardless of how your interpretation goes. The first is to renovate and make minor adjustments to the 2-story residence, which results in a minor exterior changes. On the first floor, this includes elimination of a powder room, bump out adjacent to the front porch on the entrance facade, and filling in a small area of the kitchen where there's another sort of awkward bump to have the main entry elevation appear as one consistent line facade on the first floor. The second floor work involves combining 3 existing single dormers into 1 overall dormer, again, making just sort of a clean straight line across the second floor. Both of these changes are to simplify roof lines and facades and improve the street appearance. The net result of these changes is a nominal reduction in GFA. It's 1 square feet less the house. As was noted in the previous presentation, similarly, this house was constructed under the old code, which permitted greater GFA than allowable today. I believe it's important to highlight that the house GFA is grandfathered and legal as it exists, and the net result of this project is a reduction in that legally existing GFA, which is moving towards zoning conformity, not the opposite. The second area variance request is for a side yard setback for the detached garage. The current detached garage was built in 2002. I believe Billy included the variance paperwork for that. It was granted both a side yard and a rear yard setback variance in 2002 for its construction. The goal of the project is to keep the garage in a similar location, which has a precedent on Hunting Lane. I believe Bob Hefner looked at that back in 2002 and found that the majority of the freestanding garages on Hunting Lane were sited in a similar location, tucked in the rear, giving expanse between the house and the garage. The proposed garage that we are requesting will move the variances from 2 to 1. So ours is conforming to the rear yard setback, which the current garage is not, but it is non-conforming to the side yard, which is the current is not as well. All in all, the variance requests, I believe, are minor area variances, which result in similar conditions to what appears on the parcel today. I'm not certain that anyone with a naked eye could actually read the volumetric reduction of a house by 1 square foot, or the siting of a garage mere feet from its existing location in a similar height. The benefit to the applicant in realizing their desired appearance and design far outweighs any potential neighborhood impact or any detriment. And we feel that the reduction in the nonconformities, granted albeit a 1 square foot in GFA and 1 less variance for the garage, it does move towards conformity, which is the purpose of zoning, is to become more conforming over time. I do believe that the house, the street facade, if you look at the proposed versus the existing elevations which appear in your packet, the street side appearance is a benefit to the applicant and the neighborhood and the village historic district overall. Other than that, I stand here for any questions that the board may have, or should they wish to hear from Mr. Robinson, he's here as well.
I think we'd like to hear from Billy next, if we can. Thanks, Brendan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Billy Hajak for the village. I prepared a memorandum to the board, submitted it to you earlier this week. I can review that, or if you have any specific questions.
Just want to hit maybe a few highlights on the memorandum, or?
Sure. Sure. As described by Ms. Britton, Bistrian, sorry. It's an existing 2-story residence that exceeds the current allowable gross floor area. It was constructed pursuant to zoning. The gross floor area has changed a little bit. I'm not probably a measurement item. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. It was slightly smaller when it was originally built. It's slightly larger now. Again, I would imagine it's purely how architects are measuring gross floor area. But at the time it was constructed, it was 12% plus 1,200 square feet of gross floor area. And today's regulations are slightly smaller than that. So this is in the Hunting Lane Historic District. The property is, the building itself is not historic, nor is the garage, the existing garage. They were all constructed in 2002. At the time the building was constructed and the garage were constructed, there was a lot of attention paid to the proposed garage. Originally, if I read the file correctly, the garage was proposed closer to the street in the front yard area, being part of the house. Through multiple, I guess, negotiations with the then owner, the garage was moved to the rear of the property and tucked into the back corner of the lot, which is very consistent with the historic development patterns within the village, not just the Hunting Lane Historic District, but the village in general. Garages tend to be tucked into the rear corners of properties, specifically smaller properties in that nature.
And I actually sat on this in 2002. I don't look that, I'm beige, but we specifically put that garage in the corner because that's what Hunting Lane, and that's what most of the garages in the village, most of the neighborhoods, the older neighborhoods in the village have the garages tucked in the corner. Yeah. This was a big house on the lot when we approved it. So I just, to go to your point, we spent a lot of time getting the garage in the corner on this property.
Yeah, I mean, that was the focus of the application, I guess, was the garage at that time. I would also just point out that the village has encouraged garages to remain garages. The idea that they're used for storage and parking of automobiles, not being used for pool houses and entertainment areas. This one has doors and patios and arbors that, or not an arbor, but an awning that makes it attractive for use other than a garage. If there were a pool house, you could have a pool house in the garage, or you could have a rec room in there, but the setbacks would vary. It'd have to be moved into the property to meet the required setbacks.
And Billy or Britton, did this go to the DRB yet, or has not?
It has not.
Not gone to the DRB?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
No, I think we're good. Anybody?
No.
I don't think I have any issue with the house design, or it's not really design, that what they're doing to the house. I do want to see the garage remain in the back corner of the property. That's how I feel.
I kind of echo Billy's concern with the garage. Having a garage with access to the street from one side and then having glass doors and awnings and stuff on the pool side, it just tells me that it's going to be used for something other than a garage. That's my concern.
Anybody else have any? Anybody in the audience like to speak? Please.
Hi, my name is Alan Robinson. I'm the
I'll just swear you in.
Swear you in. Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Alan Robinson, 82 Beaver Street, New York, New York.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead, Alan.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the program of the garage. So the reason the client is building this garage and not keeping the existing garage is that they actually have two nice cars that they want to store here. To kind of speak to the awnings and the large glass doors that face out to the yard, that was kind of done so that in their backyard it didn't look like it was a garage. We were trying to make that as attractive as possible. So when you're sitting on the rear terrace or when you're using the swimming pool, that building looks a little bit nicer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And board members, any questions or concerns or?
Just with the operations of the garage, so I guess you're driving in one car at a time, but if both cars are parked, you have to pull out the first one to be able to pull out the second one, right? Am I reading this correctly?
Yes.
It's stacked back to back. So I guess one is a collector Sunday car and the other one is a regular.
Will you be able to speak at the podium just for the record? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sorry about that.
It's okay. Sure, yes, they're both collector cars. One is a Defender and another is a Porsche that the client owns.
So you're pulling in and pulling out, and there's no turnaround.
No, and it's because they store their cars now. And so by building this larger garage, they can just store the cars.
And how does it work with the present garage, with the driveway? Same thing, they have to go. So you're going in and backing out.
Yes.
So no change to the driveway, no change to operations, just the shape of the building moved up.
Exactly.
And does the adjoining neighbor, has the adjoining neighbor had any objections because the structure's now moving closer to their line of sight?
I think that we're trying to keep the village has been trying to keep the garages in the back for years. That's kind of the object here. They don't want them.
And we have no letters in opposition or support.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Any questions, concerns? Nope. Motion to close the hearing? So moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. A motion to close the meeting? So moved. Second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.